So I've spent most of my career working with artists in the capacity of either a talent agent or a manager. And for the last 4 years, I've been building a company as an entrepreneur that's building tools and software for artists with STEM. And as I sort of sit between these two worlds of music and tech, I can't help but make the analogies. And so when I sit here with you, I see you as a serial entrepreneur. And you've been in a number of bands before this unicorn that we know as Guns N' Roses took off. So what was that like? Like, what were some of the bands that worked and didn't work, and how did you know Guns N' Roses was gonna be this big thing?
The one?
The one.
So I came up in the punk rock scene of Seattle, sometime around 78, Seattle, yeah. There was a real, I saw The Clash in 79, a band that was so exotic to me. They were I saw Zeppelin in 77, play the Kingdom, it was enormous. And the band was so small and so far away, and I saw some other big bands. I saw Kiss and whatnot, and the punk rock thing hit, and the Clash were playing right in front of me. And after the show, like, they came out into the crowd, and Strummer said something on the stage that always left an indentation on me, which was, there's no difference between us and you. We're all the same, we're in it together. And thus was born like a DIY punk rock scene in Seattle, and we did everything ourselves, making flyers, booking shows, carting gear, booking like VFW halls, like union halls, lying to the police that it was like a whatever it was, a teen dance, but we were having punk rock shows. Learning how to do the commerce of that and whatnot, you know, how to finagle the job that you had to get to pay, you know, for rehearsal place and for an apartment eventually, and for flyers and for gear. You know, you would trade for gear. Yeah. And I started really learning the value of things, and I was really driven. Music was going to be my thing. Was I going to make a living at it? That was kind of a joke. It was just my passion. And if I was broke doing my passion, so be it. I had to do it. And I played in a bunch of bands in Seattle. One of them got signed to Jello Biafra's Dead Kennedy Singers label. We got no money for it, but we put a mark on the American map of punk rock. I was working at a restaurant in Seattle, saving my money to move to LA. And the thing I was going to tell you, which I didn't tell you on the phone, was there was a guy, Bruce Pavitt. He was another cook at the restaurant, and he was writing a column for a local newspaper called Sub Pop. That was the name of the column. And as I left for LA from Seattle, he said, I'm going to put my first single out, a 7-inch single. And that became Sub Pop Records. And I moved to LA chasing my dream, and the first people I met was Slash. And Steven threw an ad in the newspaper, in the Recycler, if you know that. And we met down at Cantor's, and there was these long-haired guys. I had short, like punk rock hair. We stared at each other, but found that we had a lot of the same musical influences. I'm not bringing up money in any of this, right? It was just meeting the right people. A couple weeks later, Izzy moved across the street from me. When I finally moved out of my car into an apartment, I got a job in Northridge, which I thought was LA.
Yep.
Driving all the way from Seattle. Oh, I'm in LA. Was not in LA. The cook, after my first shift, said, I asked him, where's Hollywood? He goes, Hollywood, that's like 25 miles away. So anyhow, Izzy moved across the street, and he was starting a band with Axel, his friend, and we met, and the forces of the five of us. I didn't move to LA to be in some sort of, there was always a missing piece in the tons of bands I was in Seattle. I toured, I did punk rock tours, I did all the things. I knew how to book a tour, I knew how to make flyers, I knew a lot of things. But if you're missing a piece in your band, like there was always a weak link. When the five of us got in a room the first time in Silver Lake at a rehearsal place, it was on. You could tell immediately. It was pretty ferocious, and just got that feeling.
And so we talk a lot about building the right team, right? And we use the analogy of getting the band together. So you guys get the band together. Mm-hmm. So how do you go from day one to what felt like a number one single overnight?
Yeah. Okay, so my daughter has a band now, and the advice I have for her, sorry about that, guys, and what drove us is just writing the right songs, believing in yourself. Commerce was not a part of any of it at the beginning. You got to really believe in your idea. I've seen some ideas here, and people that believe in it. And a rock band is no different. We wrote the songs we wrote. We took from our own experiences, melded it together, and wrote what became that Appetite for Destruction record. And then we started realizing we had to draw people to clubs. And that was the next step. Our first gig was to 3 people. Our second gig was to 4. We knew all 3 and 4 people who came to our shows. Slash came up with this idea of a newsletter. Let's collect everybody's street hustling stuff, Let's get everybody's address. And we'll for our next gig, we'll get the flyer, we'll fold it up, tape it, put their address on it, put a stamp, and send it to their house. And we started this mailing list, and it grew to 50, and it grew to 100, and it grew to 200, and it grew to a point where Slash was making calls out of he worked at Centerfold, the magazine stand on Fairfax. So he got fired because he was using the phone too much. But that was our phone, You can't get fired, man, that's our phone. But I mean, we had so many on the mailing list, like how are we gonna afford the stamps to send these, our flyers out? But that newsletter really, the mailing list, it wasn't a newsletter we put out, we just sent them flyers. But it really worked, and we hustled, and we started to bring in 50 people and 100 people, and kept writing those songs. And somehow the songs identified with our generation. They weren't pretty, it wasn't sweet, they weren't love songs. It was about drugs, it was about, the darker side of what we were seeing. This is post, we all lived through that recession, that early 80s recession. There was no jobs. Moved to Hollywood here right after the Olympics, so the cops just left Hollywood, and it was Wild West as far as drugs and crime and whatnot. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing heroin, we're seeing crack, we're seeing everything, and we wrote about it because it was what we knew. But we started selling out these clubs, and we started learning about the commerce of that too. Like our crowds would drink the most. We broke drinking records at the Troubadour.
Wow.
What's that mean for us?
Did you guys
get a piece of that?
Right.
No, you don't get a piece of that. All right. Okay, well, in the future, let's see if we can't get a piece of that.
So did you guys ever negotiate your fees maybe lower up front, but a higher rev share to get a piece of?
We started to do that.
Bar?
I mean, you got to remember at the beginning, we had to pay to play. You have to pay for the lights. You have to pay for the sound guy. And we didn't have the money to play. We did have an angel in Mark Cantor, who was Slash's best friend. He would loan us the money up front. We'd pay him when we got paid after the show.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we graduated out of the pay to play to actually getting paid to play, which wasn't much. We all had jobs. We had this shitty little room behind Guitar Center on Sunset with no bathroom, where we rehearsed and often lived. But we believed in ourselves, believed in our thing, and labels started to show up to our shows, and that was the next step for us.
So there's this great story that you told me about you guys getting signed, and you make I think at this point you were on tour with Aerosmith, and you guys made the video for Welcome to the Jungle. And even though you guys were starting to draw in these amazing crowds of people to your shows, MTV would still not play this video, right?
Well, we weren't really drawing people. So we got signed. We made an appetite for destruction. It was not an instant success. With our core crowd of people like us, we had an initial run of 30 to 50,000 records worldwide, which sold. That's a lot of people listening to your record.
A lot still.
That's a lot of people. We'd go out, we opened for the Colts. We came across Canada. There would be 7 people out there for us, and then the Colt would come on, and the place was full. We came down the West Coast. LA was great for us, and then we went back into the South. We opened for Alice Cooper and Megadeth in theaters, so we had to set up in front of Alice Cooper stuff and Megadeth stuff, so we had no room in the front of the stage, except for the drum kit was right there against the lip of the stage. We were getting traction, though, in the UK and in Japan, where we would go there and suddenly we're playing theaters and they're sold out. So there was, and we went to Japan, we played Budokan. So that's a jump up, big time.
Yeah.
So we knew there was something there. We made a video for Welcome to the Jungle. MTV refused to play it because it was, I guess, the subject matter or whatever.
Well, because you guys were talking about the stuff that no one else was, right?
It wasn't pop. It just wasn't pop. It wasn't popular, that kind of viewpoint, I guess, and style of music. So we had an A&R guy at Geffen who championed us, and he went out on a limb and called David Geffen to make a call to MTV to just play our video once. Just play our video once. Give the guys a chance. And they played it at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. And there was some record-breaking amount. It's on the internet somewhere. What happened next was a bunch of people called in and kept calling to play that video again. And that's when the groundswell really started for us.
And that's a big traction, right?
Huh?
I mean, that's some real traction at that point you guys have.
We started to move up. We made a video for Sweet Child. Now, we didn't have a lot of money. We had a budget for the record, and we had some. You got to pay that all back, by the way, which we found out then. We thought it was free money,
Can you talk? Actually, can we pause for a second? I think it'd be great to talk a little bit about sort of the way that the money flows in the business, and a little bit about what most people don't understand, especially artists, is they get this massive advance from a label.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't understand sort of how the recoupment works.
Right.
And some of them are angry, and you hear them complaining about, well, I don't know where my money is. When am I going to see something?
Right.
Because you
the
have
pipeline.
the success.
They
Right,
call
the
it.
pipeline.
It's in the pipeline. So we had to, basically take a crash course. There was this this Donald Passman book on the music industry. We would read this thing. We didn't really, publishing is a thing, and young musicians don't know anything about because it means nothing to you. But we were getting offered money for our publishing. So one guy offered us at Denny's a $10,000 traveler's check for the publishing on Welcome to the Jungle. That was a lot of money for us, $10,000. But we just thought if it's worth something to him, it must be worth something to us. Later on, when we got signed, we were offered a couple $100,000 for a big cut of our publishing. Well, if it's worth $200,000 to them, it must be worth $200,000 to us. And besides, it's not their fucking songs. We wrote them. It was really kind of a street mentality. The money that we got from the label, we did understand it was a loan, and we started to figure out the little kind of bylines in the contract, the breakage and whatnot, which is spoilage and breakage that you're just under no control of us, that we would end up paying for, or that we wouldn't get paid for those records, one way or the other. We took a crash course in all of that. We got tour support. We weren't making enough money to pay for a tour bus. We were borrowing money from our roadies to eat.
Wow.
You know, we knew that when we started selling records, the Sweet Child of Mine, we made the video above a bank downtown LA. It was very cheap. If you see that video, it's just us in a room. It's black and white. There's a couple, you know, the little camera dollies on the floor, and that was about it. There was a dog. One of our dogs was in it. And I think our girlfriends were in it. It was super cheap. But they released the single and that video, and that's what really took off. And by that point, we were on tour with Aerosmith. And those 7 people that showed up early turned into 30 the next night. And the next night it was 300. And the next night it was 800. And by the end of like a couple weeks, all 17,000 people that were there really before to see Aerosmith were showing up for us. And we started selling a lot of records. The album started moving up the charts. The single went to #1, then the album went to #1. And things changed there. So we were selling millions of records. We were still borrowing money from our roadies for a sandwich. And then, you know, at that point they said, well, there's money coming. It's in the pipeline. Okay, fine. When's this pipeline due to us? And we did get paid. You know, we got paid. There's a total next level to that, auditing later on and whatnot. But then the question becomes, you know, my first check I got, I'll just be frank, it was the first check. So I went from poverty level person to getting a check for $80,000 in 1988. Mm-hmm. $80,000 might as well have been $1 billion. I didn't know what to do with $80,000. So you begin asking questions about money. I didn't know what a stock was, what a bond was. If somebody said risk, sorry about this, guys. If somebody said risk to me, you know, I'd start swinging. You know, I think it's very important, if there's any musicians or your kids are musicians, there's nothing wrong with asking questions and saying, I don't know what that means. Yeah. And I was afraid to do that for the next 10 years. Yeah.
I mean, what you're talking about is something that I think a lot of musicians can relate to, which is, 1, you don't know when your money's coming. 2, when it finally comes, you don't know where it comes from. And 3, you don't know what to do with it when you earn it. Yeah. And one of the misnomers, I think, in the business is that people assume that musicians are just good at music. And at STEM, we believe that musicians are just business people. And if you give them the data and the visibility into that, they can make really smart business decisions.
Yeah.
And you went to study finance as well.
I did. Well, I looked into what you're doing, and it's really quite amazing. And
Thank you.
I told you my daughter has a band. I'm going to turn them on to what you're doing because it's brilliant. Yeah, I went to. My 20s were tumultuous at best. I think that's what they say. But I woke up in an ICU at 30, and there was a kind of a line drawn down the sand whether I want to live or die, and it was that pretty basic. I decided to take the first one, to live, and I had a big family. I had a lot to live for. And so the decision, the thought came to my head, I've made money in my 20s. Now, I made a good amount of money. I don't know how much. I don't know who has taken from me, how much they have, if they have, which they did. But it was time for me to sort of arrest this portion of my life and and gain some knowledge. So I got myself eventually through going through community colleges and courses, and I wanted to go to Seattle U, to Albert School of Business. I thought I could go in and write a check and just go to school, and I got a GED, and I couldn't just go in and write a check. They let me know. So I had to go through community college at Seattle Central and get A's in these classes and write admittance essay, and one of the guys from Presidents of the United States of America, the band, he went to Brown, and he was an English major. I'm like, what do I do? How do I write? I forget how to write a fucking essay. So I wrote, he goes, and what do I say? He goes, tell him everything. Tell him your pancreas blew up. Tell him how much you drank, how much cocaine you snorted. Tell him everything. And tell him you have a wife now, and you have a little baby, and you know, that you want to go to this school. And so I did that. I wrote this letter, and I got in. And I mean, just the accounting classes at the beginning alone were so valuable to me. I could read my financial statements that we were getting, and for the band, and my own personal financial statements. And there was questions that arose from me being able to finally read these things, and some nervous people on Ventura Boulevard. And I ended up moving accounting firms and matriculated through school to the point, it was my wife who's here, Susan, and we have 2 beautiful daughters. They're 18 and 21 now. We decided I was going to try this thing with Slash and Matt, and we got Scott Weil, and we formed this band called Velvet Revolver. Yeah, thank you. Bonus points.
There's some fans in here, I think.
Yeah. But at that point, I knew what I was talking about, you know, to a certain extent. Never assume you're the smartest guy in the room, but I think they were assuming I was the smartest guy in the room, which is just fine. So when we did our record deal, we did our deal with agents, with a manager, with merch companies. I was there at every turn, and we had learned a lot from the Guns N' Roses experience. Managers commissioning off the gross, meaning we went out and toured, and we'd get say $1 million guarantee in the early 90s, a ton of money. The manager would take his commission off the top of that.
Right.
We'd pay for all production. Production ran at about 50%, if not more back then. At the end of a gig, we might end up owing money. Sometimes we didn't go on time in the early 90s. So you got to pay out all the overages. You're paying for cops, you're paying for union workers, you're paying for trains to stay open. So we'd be in the hole a lot of the times. Meanwhile, the manager
takes their 10, 15, 20% off the top.
Yeah, and he moved outside of LA, so you couldn't see where he lived. And finally, one time I went down there, I'm like, he's got horses, and he lives on the golf course, and
oh my God.
I'm like, Jesus, horses! Fuck! I got a 2-bedroom in the valley, man. But you learn, you live, you learn, and serial entrepreneur indeed. That is, I got that from punk rock. Doing
it all yourself in the beginning.
Do it yourself, and even going back to school and learning the stuff. That was punk rock. You know, I really owe it all to that. Being a husband to my wife and father to the girls, I do it in a very punk rock way, which is meaning just be truthful and be fucking vigorous and honest and do that thing. And I think if you do that in your whatever your venture is, you know, you'll be okay. Believe in what you do. Be punk rock. Be vigorous. Be honest. Be truthful, and learn. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to say, "I don't know what that means. Please tell me." That's all I got.
Well, I have one last question.
You made me follow Gwyneth Paltrow, Adam Schiff, Ron. You didn't. Ron.
That's not my fault.
No.
But I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah, cool.
So one last question. What's the next venture?
What next venture?
Or adventure?
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. My next venture is being like the hype man for my wife's novel that comes out in April. I'm so proud of her. I'm happy to be her hype man. There's more touring coming up. There's
with
more
which bands?
Recording. Huh?
As a solo artist with a band.
Sure, all of that.
With all of that.
Yeah.
Amazing. I only got to see you 10 times during the last Guns N' Roses tour, so I think I need more stage time.
Say it again.
We only got to see you like 10 times on your last tour.
Oh yeah, you got to see us 20 times in the next.
Yeah, I think so
Just
too.
10?
Just 10.
Yeah. So we just got done with a tour. It was 2.5 years around the world, about 4 times. So I'm going to rest for a couple weeks and then be my wife's hype man. And there's some stuff coming up. Yeah.
Exciting. Well, thank you for being here and sharing that with us and your story.
Thanks, guys.